Hi, my name is Ringting Hongjui and I'm currently serving as an additional SP in Manipur Police Service. Welcome to the first video of my YouTube channel where I plan to put out a series of educational and informational videos related to various aspects of law and order maintenance in our society. Today I would like to talk to you about drug abuse. Now, why would I, someone in the Manipur Police Service, want to talk about drug abuse? Well, it's simple. Drug abuse has an enormous implication for the maintenance of law and order in society. Since joining the Manipur Police Service, I received numerous distress calls from the public that are related in one way or the other to the problem of drug abuse. In this video, I will be covering the following points. Number one, what is a drug? Number two, what does drug abuse or addiction mean? Number three, broad classification of drugs based on their interaction with our body and mind. Number four, classifications based on its legality. Number five, extent of drug abuse in the world and India. Number six, causes of addiction. Number seven, consequences of addiction. Number eight, preventive mechanism. Number nine, efforts to eradicate drug abuse by the government, including government initiatives and enforcement mechanism. And lastly, the conclusion. What is a drug? Put simply, drugs can be defined as any natural or synthetic substance other than food that, when taken into the living body, causes physiological as well as psychological changes in the body. But of course, to avoid any confusion, when we talk about drug abuse, we are not talking about pharmaceutical drugs, also known as prescribed medication or medicine, which is a chemical substance used to treat, cure, prevent, or diagnose a disease or promote well-being. When we speak about drug abuse, we are interested in psychoactive or psychotropic drugs and narcotic drugs. So, what are these drugs? Psychoactive or psychotropic drugs are chemical substances that affect the functioning of the central nervous system, altering perception, mood, or consciousness and behavior. Narcotic drugs, on the other hand, are those substances that cause stupor, muscular relaxation, and a reduction or elimination of sensitivity. What does drug abuse or addiction mean? In the most basic term, it is the continued compulsive use of a drug despite harm to self or others. Drugs associated with this term are alcohol, cannabis, barbiturates, benzodiazepines, cocaine, opium, heroin, amphetamines, etc., to name a few. Thirdly, broad classification of drugs based on their interaction with our body and mind. Number one, depressants. They are those that slow down the activity of the central nervous system. An example includes alcohol. Secondly, stimulants. They are those that increase the activity of the central nervous system and thus increase the pulse rate, heart rate, and elevate blood pressure. Drugs associated with this category are nicotine, caffeine, amphetamine, cocaine, and MDMA or ecstasy. Number three, hallucinogens. They are those drugs that distort perceptions of reality to induce delusions, such as seeing or hearing something that doesn't exist. Example includes cannabis, inhalants, LSD, and ketamine. Fourthly, others. This category includes drugs that have properties of more than one of the above categories. An example includes cannabis, which causes both hallucinogenic and depressant effects, and MDMA or ecstasy, which causes both stimulating and hallucinogenic effects. Classification based on its legality. Drugs can also be classified based on their legal standpoint. Number one, legally accepted drugs. They are those that are legally accepted, but their usage is restricted by certain factors like age limit or time and space. For instance, consumption of alcohol is restricted by age and timing, whereas smoking cigarettes is restricted by age and location or place. Secondly, legally controlled drugs. They are those that are regulated by international laws or treaties or national laws. For instance, in India, the Narcotic Drug and Psychotropic Substance Act 1985 regulates the cultivation, consumption, transportation, and trading of narcotic plants as well as synthetic drugs like cannabis, opium poppy, coca, amphetamine, barbiturates, etc. For instance, India is among 12 countries where the cultivation of cannabis is allowed by issuing license for medical purpose in a controlled manner by the Central Bureau of Narcotics. However, policies related to regulated drugs vary widely. Take for example, in countries like Canada and Thailand, cultivation of cannabis is legally accepted to the extent of its limited usage for both medicinal and recreational purposes. Whereas in Germany, it is tightly regulated and the medicinal use of marijuana for patients with no other therapeutic treatment is allowed. In Belgium, one can grow one female plant for recreational use. The bottom line is that the complete legalization of these controlled drugs will depend on the discovery of their medicinal use case scenario in the near future, which is by far still outweighed by the negative effect of addiction on human beings and is the reason why it continues to be strictly regulated. Extent of drug abuse in the world and India. According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime 2023 report, there are 296 million drug users in the world, which accounts for 3.8% of the world population. Of the 296 million drug users, 39.5 million people are affected by drug use disorder. Drug use disorder implies depression, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder, and personality disorder. As per this report, India is the single largest market for opiate users in the world. In the case of cannabis, in 2018, about 31 million people reportedly used cannabis in India as per the report provided by the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India. In terms of states, UP has the highest number of users, followed by Bihar, Kerala, West Bengal, and Maharashtra. Causes of addiction. Addiction has something to do with exposure to dopamine producing substances in our brains. Dopamine is a powerful neurotransmitter molecule in the brain that helps us experience pleasure. All of us release dopamine at a tonic baseline rate. It is the deviation from that baseline that makes a difference. So, when we experience pleasure, our dopamine release goes above baseline. Likewise, dopamine can go below that tonic baseline when we experience pain. If we expose ourselves to substances like narcotic and psychotropic drugs, which produce 2 to 10 times more dopamine in our brain, then our tonic baseline changes to a lower level over time, causing a chemical imbalance in our brain. For instance, if chocolate raises dopamine level by 50%, intake of drugs like amphetamine will raise dopamine levels in our brain by 1000%. Therefore, regular drug use over a period of time causes the brain to produce less dopamine. When the drugs are not active in the brain, dopamine levels can drop, causing uncomfortable withdrawal symptoms and powerful cravings. That condition creates a dependency on those drugs, causing addiction. Now that we have gotten an idea of why narcotic and psychotropic drugs are so addictive, let us now explore how most people start using drugs in the first place. People take drugs out of curiosity, especially during adolescence, to socialize and have fun, to relax and forget problems, to lessen inhibition and gain confidence as a form of escapism from pain and suffering, to relieve boredom and stress, self-medication to cope with problems as well as in the form of doctor's prescription for certain treatment. Who is at risk of getting addiction? Number one, over 50% of the risk is known to be hereditary, as the early stage of development and infancy have their dopamine levels set by the genes from parents. This is the reason why some babies of addicted parents are born with withdrawal symptoms. However, with life experiences, the dopamine level can be changed. Secondly, early use of drugs increase a person's chance of developing addiction, as adolescents have flexible brains that can be easily shaped by the intake of high dopamine producing substances. Thirdly, drug abuse increases greatly during the transition period of one's life, like entering to primary school, changing school, academic failure, entering to college, breaking up of relationship, loss of job, divorce, etc. Fourthly, it is also a part of the behavioral aspect of development, as 90% of addiction happen before the age of 21 years. Fifthly, peer pressure. People who have drug addict friends have a higher chance of becoming an addict. Sixthly, easy access to drugs causes a higher chance of encountering drug addiction. Seventh, desire to try new things or take greater risks increase tendencies to experiment with drugs. Eight, abusing a doctor's prescription. Prescription drugs for pain management and athletic performance introduce some to addiction. Ninth, impulsive people are at risk of getting addicted. Consequences of addiction. Number one, high crime rate in the society. Depending on which state or country you live in, approximately 50 to 60% of individuals arrested for most types of crime test positive for drugs at the time of arrest, which goes up to 80% in the case of juvenile arrestees. It is also the lead cause of violence against children, where around 40% of the child victimizers were on drugs at the time of committing the crime. 30% of physical violence in domestic relationships is related to drugs, out of which 55% of the cases are contributed by alcohol. A substantial percentage of traffic fatalities are drug related. Up to 40% of employee theft is related to drug abuse. Secondly, physical health. Drug abuse is such a powerful disease. It is the number one cause of death for people below the age of 50 years. It accounts for about 11.8 million premature deaths directly or indirectly each year globally. Addiction can take away one's beauty, and the lifespan of drug addicts is cut short by about 10 years in general. Thirdly, effect on the economy. People facing addiction problem often faces poverty and trauma, which causes long suffering, anxiety, depression, and feeling of hopelessness, taking a toll on the economy. It also limits companies from hiring a productive workforce, causing a high rate of unemployment. Fourthly, impact on environment. The production of illicit drugs contributes to deforestation, and the use of high amounts of chemical fertilizer accelerates environmental degradation. Sixthly, security compromise. Ultimately, it weakened the security of the nation, which is the reason why illicit trading and trafficking of drugs in commercial quantity can land a person to life imprisonment or even death sentences for repeat offenders. China is known to have the highest rate of execution related to illicit drug trafficking, maybe due to its bitter experience with the history of opium wars during the 19th century. Preventive mechanism. What are the preventive measures to avoid drug abuse or addiction? Number one, we need to modify risk factors like deviant and negative attitude, aggressive behaviors, poor self control, low emotional intelligence, communication gap with parents or friends, inculcate social problem solving skill, taking care of academic failures and school dropouts. Secondly, strengthen protective factors like parental support. Isolation from community and family is one of the single most contributing factors driving people into drug addiction. Bonding and connections, love and relationships with family and friends prevent addiction. Efforts to eradicate drug abuse. Number one, preventive measures taken by India. Drug Free India or Nasha Mukt Bharat Abhiyan and National Action Plan for Drug Demand Reduction NAPDDR provide funds for preventive education, awareness generation, and running rehabilitation centers across the country. Secondly, institutional measures. India has created various institutions at the central level, such as the Narcotic Control Bureau, the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, the Custom Departments, etc., to enforce drug law and coordinate with state police departments and international agencies. Thirdly, legislative measures. India is a signatory of the following three international treaties, which are ratified by more than 180 countries across the world to curb the menace of drug trade and related activities. Number one, the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs 1961 for cannabis, coca, and opium-like effect. Number two, the Convention on Psychotropic Substance 1971 for newly discovered psychotropics like amphetamine, stimulants, barbiturates, benzodiazepines, and psychiatric. And thirdly, the UN Convention Against Illicit Traffic in Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances 1988. The three major drug laws of India that fulfill the above international obligations are the Drugs and Cosmetic Act 1940, the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substance Act 1985, and the Prevention of Illicit Trafficking in Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substance Act 1988. These laws are very stringent and the contravention of which leads to punishment based on quantity of the burnt substance. The table below shows the offences and penalties as per the NDPS Act. And the second table shows the categories of quantities which are small, more than small but less than commercial, and commercial quantities. Conclusion: addiction doesn't discriminate between class, caste, gender, status, and age. Addiction can happen to anyone, and so recovery can happen for everyone too. If you are a parent, don't condone use of drug to your children as it increases the chance of addiction. If your child is facing the problem of addiction, don't cut off communication. It will only worsen isolation. Get communication started because isolation leads to addiction and fellowship and connection prevent addiction. If you are facing the problem of addiction, don't suffer in silence. Drop the shame. The solution is available to all. Be honest with others and get help now instead of waiting to figure out forever. Testimonies of reversal drug abuser indicates that behavioral therapies, medication, practicing the 12 steps of Alcoholic Anonymous, family support, and others help in reclaiming life. Try one of them. Keep yourself busy by engaging in productive activities like acquiring new skills, reading books, sporting activities, house chores, etc. With that said and done, take pledge of no to drugs. Thank you for watching my video. Please like, subscribe, press notification button and share with your families and friends who may need to know about the intricacies of drug addiction. Give your valuable comment below and suggest a topic for my next video.